Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Peter and this will be the 10th article in the series about the swimming rules. Now in the previous article I was talking about where technical officials come from, and now I want to continue to talk about what the significance of them is, why we need them. So they might not appear to be doing much for most of the time, but you know, now and then things happen that need some kind of intervention. In extreme cases, for example, what do you do about an 8-year-old who jumps into a butterfly race and wins it doing freestyle? The rules, there are some general rules that apply to all the strokes, but the bulk of the rules are there mostly to distinguish between the strokes. So they have to be applied in the form stroke races. And the basic rules that apply to all the races, you still need someone there to make sure that nobody jumps the start and that they actually touch the ends at the turns and at the finish. Now disqualifications are distressing for everyone involved, but you know, the other contestants, the other competitors can be more irate, and justifiably so, by being beaten by someone who has gone outside the rules. So it's a matter of equity. The technical officials are there to protect the interests of all those who swam within the rules. Now, it's always easy to be soft-hearted and say, oh, I don't want to upset anyone, but it's going to end in some kind of injustice. And ultimately, when you think about it, it doesn't help the swimmer much either, because what about a swimmer who's never been disqualified at a local meet and finally they get to a championship meet where there are referees and they get disqualified for something they've never been disqualified before? That's going to be a bit of a shock to them. So we can go on debating the significance of technical officials. Like I said, 95% of the time they don't seem to do much. They just sort of blow the whistle and then walk up and down. It's only when something happens that they're required to intervene, but I can tell you that they're very busy most of the time. They are required to watch what is happening in the water practically all the time, and they're busy comparing what they're seeing with the rules to make sure nobody goes outside the rules. It's only occasionally when you're walking back again or when there's not much happening that you've got time to sort of let the mind loosen and scan around and look amongst the spectators and things like that. You're pretty busy the whole time. Now the present convention is that there must be a referee, ultimately because someone must be responsible for the accuracy of the results, and that's who it is according to the rule book, the referee. And if there's no one there who's accredited, then whoever takes that job on is considered referee for a day. And what sort of a job they do? Look, the participants are always free to vote with their feet, and if they don't think it was done very well, then they can decide whether they're going to go back there again next season. In addition to that, accredited officials must be operating there on the day if the times are to be recognised for records or as qualifying times. So this discussion is to be continued. And now to get to the actual rules section of this article. It's entitled Breaking Stroke, and I gave it that title some 12 or 15 years ago when these were first written. And breaking stroke was something you heard officials talk about quite regularly. In fact, there's no such rule. Look, on my clipboard, I've got the list of all infractions, and these are what are written on the infraction cards. If it's not on there, then it's not an infraction. Now let's look for breaking stroke. Not there. Breaking stroke, I think, was an expression that was used to cover a whole range of incidents that are disqualifiable that occurred momentarily, as opposed to something that occurred continuously, such as, for example, a breaststroke swimmer using a scissor kick throughout the race. So these momentary things could be something like hanging an arm over the lane rope while you try to clear your throat of a mouthful of water that's gone down the wrong way. In breaststroke or butterfly, you couldn't really do that without breaking the rules that say that the actions of the arms must be simultaneous, and for breaststroke in the horizontal plane. There's an example. Another example's a good one, and this is why coaches tell the swimmers, never ever adjust your goggles during the race. Now, that's a really good policy. To try to tell swimmers that there could be exceptions. You could do it in freestyle, you may be able to do it in backstroke, but in breaststroke and in butterfly, it's pretty hard to grapple with your goggles without, as I said, infringing the rules that say that the actions of the arms have to be simultaneous and all this sort of thing. So I think that's what it was meant to be, but it was just basically some officials' jargon that they fell into using sometime around then. But since we've got the infractions list and we're using infractions cards, like I said, if you wrote broke stroke on one of these, the referee would laugh at you, or he should. If they don't, then they don't know their job. There's another one, and I haven't mentioned it, I just thought to mention it recently. There was another example of jargon that was going around at the time and was being enforced, and that was movement on the block. A referee might come around the end of the pool and say, that's a disqualification, movement on the block. Let's have a look. No mention of it. Here we are, starts. Started before the starting signal, did not immediately take up starting position, delayed the start, willful disobedience, and both hands were not holding the starting grips at the start in backstroke. That's all of them. There's no such thing as movement on the block. Anyone fidgeting on the block could have caused a delay of the start, because the starter cannot issue the start signal until all the swimmers are steady. So you're not going to write movement on the block on one of these. It doesn't exist. It would be delayed start. The other one it could have been is anyone who had, after they'd settled into their starting position, had begun to move forwards at all, even just a little bit of drifting. That is being interpreted as starting before the start signal. Here we are, start before start signal, right up the top of the list. They've pre-printed these, they're so common. But those are the things that can go on the infraction cards, but movement on the block, you won't find it anywhere. It's just a fad, some jargon that some of the technical officials fell into, a decade or a bit more ago, and should have died out, I hope, but it just shows that not even technical officials are immune to falling into fads. So to get back to it, enforcing these rules, look, as I've written here, in borderline cases it is not humanly possible to distinguish what was accidental from what was intentional, and especially children who are learning to expand their boundaries, they'll do everything they can get away with. Because it raises the thorny old conundrum of where to draw a line. You know, say, oh, it was only a little bit, and then something else happens, oh, it was only a bit worse. No, your only option is to simply apply the rules. And as I've written here, the sad reality is that any loopholes in the rules are readily exploited by innovative swimmers, ambitious parents, and unscrupulous coaches. So there we have it. This one's probably a little bit out of date, but if you're an adult now and you had this happen to you, well, sorry, that's just how things were at the time. It should not be happening now. Oh, I should mention this infraction card list that I've got on my clipboard. That's the one that there's a link to in the description. The FINA infraction list. Go down there and click on that link and you'll find that document. They're all there. So once again, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.